this week to be working with us 5 days a week, full-time. Wayne Madsen on the InfoWars team. But that's why I better not skip network breaks like I've already done today. I better not plug, because it's expensive to fly Joe Biggs to Phoenix and to different cities around the country like Maryland. It's expensive to send 3 reporters. Paul Watson from England, from Albion, Rob Dew, Josh Owens from Texas are all going to Bilderberg. This is one of the most important Bilderbergs ever because they're discussing, from our inside sources, the future of World War III. They have a special report on that coming up as well after the break. And we're going to be sending them there. I would love to go and see the Alps. It's in the Alps on the Swiss border. I would love to go and be interviewed by the media and hang out in Europe, but I've just got too much to do here. But now I've got the forces, the skeleton crew, but nevertheless the forces to really magnify our intel and warn the world and the public. So that's why it's important to go to InfoWarsStore.com and fund our operation. We're getting great, high-quality products at low prices. 28 pages redacted from the 9/11 report that senators that have seen it and congressmen that have seen it, like Walter Jones, who's been on this show, Congressman Jones, shows our government stood down on 9/11 and that Saudi Arabia quarterbacked the attacks bare minimum. That makes 9/11 an inside job, as we warned you, because our government knew bare minimum let it happen as a pretext to take American liberty. And now, 15 years later, Al-Qaeda is reborn as ISIS and has taken over much of the Middle East, being rewarded for a job well done on 9/11. And Defense Intelligence leaked last week to Judicial Watch the fact that, indeed, our government's funding Al-Qaeda and the Wahhabist arms, the Salafist, all out of Saudi Arabia. And this is a Western-backed takeover of the Middle East by jihadis to kill every Christian they find. Bombshell intel, bottom of the hour. Coming up, I want to get into feminist clergy want Christians to refer to God as she. We're going to tell you what's behind that. We're also going to get into this amazing news story that is so important out of CBS. Something like 19.5% of Americans are on some type of antidepressant, anti-anxiety medication. Painkillers, anti-anxiety medications linked to increased risk of homicide. Also, Vince Vaughn. We knew he was a patriot, but now Vince Vaughn is as pro-gun as it gets. And he came out in a GQ magazine and sounds like he's Alex Jones, or Ron Paul. So good job to Vince Vaughn. I think he's got some good comedy movies as well, but I'll certainly, next time I'm looking at films, they're on the Netflix or whatever. I'm not a big media consumer, but I do watch movies a few times a week. I used to. I've been so busy. I haven't been lately. I'll definitely queue up a Vince Vaughn. You vote with your dollars or you lose everything. And that goes for this show, and we appreciate you. And that goes for supporting our local AM and FM affiliates. And as I was saying earlier, I'm going to send 3 reporters to Austria, to the Alps, the Austrian Alps, to cover Bilderberg 2015. That is one of the most important years ever. This video report is up on Infowars.com. We're going to tweet it out at Real Alex Jones. Bilderberg 2015, prepare for global conflict. Prepare for what could be World War III in their own words. Bilderberg, at least prepare for nuclear war and global conflict. The video is on Infowars.com and PrisonPlanet.com. If you're a radio listener, you can simply watch the free feed at Infowars.com/show or share the YouTube video. This premiered last night on the Nightly News, but have sources very close to Bilderberg. We do have a lot of their agenda already. We'll be publishing that ahead of our crew arriving. Again, Paul Watson, Rob Dew, and Josh Owens will all be in place there. So we're sending our news director there, as well as one of our best cameramen, and Paul Watson, one of our best writers of our amazing team. We're going to have massive coverage of this key Bilderberg, and here's why it's so important.
I continue to be much more concerned when it comes to our security with the prospect of a nuclear weapon going off in Manhattan.
The Bilderberg Group will coalesce June 9th through the 14th in the Austrian mountains at the Inner Alpen Hotel. How many of these instigators of widespread tyranny will be discussing their million-dollar safe bunkers between meetings as they hide like moles while their hellish plans are unleashed on the gullible masses?
It's called a panic room.
What?
A safe room. Castle keep in medieval times. Poured concrete walls, buried phone line not connected to the house's main line. You have your own ventilation system and a bank of surveillance monitors that covers nearly every corner of the house.
What's to keep someone from prying open the door?
Steel. Very thick steel.
A decade ago, safe rooms would only have been of interest to A-list celebrities who wanted to protect against stalkers, but they are now becoming popular with elites who wish to guard against potential civil unrest, which could cause crime rates to skyrocket in the aftermath of an economic collapse. According to a New York Times report, the typically 8 feet by 12 feet bulletproof rooms are an increasingly sought-after means of the elite feeling protected, just as moats and armies protected them in centuries past. Wealthy individuals, including foreigners who are more familiar with such stringent security measures, are having safe rooms installed to protect their personal possessions, as well as their own physical safety, against potential domestic disorder that could arise out of sudden economic collapse.
This huge disparity is not because of some flaw in capitalism or because of the Reagan tax cuts or even the greed of Wall Street. The problem is central banks that are out of control, printing money like no one ever imagined, and have created a massive worldwide financial inflation. And when you have a financial inflation, the people that own the stocks and the bonds get the windfall.
After 9/11, he got requests for 1 or 2 safe rooms a year, but that number has recently jumped to more than 20 rooms annually.
Probably do about 25 this year, did about 21, 22 last year, but we're looking at possibility of going up to maybe 30 the following year, so we just see an increase every year.
The notion that the elite are making preparations for mass civil disorder is no conspiracy theory. Fearing global unrest and the possibility of another major conflict, many members of the elite have been buying remote property and land in places like New Zealand.
A lot of very wealthy and powerful people are quite afraid right now. They see us on an unstable trajectory. They don't see our political institutions being what you might call representative, responsive, and pulling things together. Things are getting more and more dangerous as, say, Ferguson, Missouri brings to bear.
Ironically, Johnson is president of the Institute of New Economic Thinking, an organization founded and bankrolled by billionaire George Soros, who himself is funding the very same movement aggravating the civil unrest, the Black Lives Matter movement.
These 2 men, Frederick Young and Philando Hunter, were sentenced on this day to life in prison without parole for robbing, torturing, murdering the 2 teens who had been in Detroit trying to buy drugs.
I'd like to say sorry to the families of Ayanna Jones, Michael Brown, Eric Gardner, and I want to apologize to them for not being able to get justice for their loved ones who was murdered in cold blood. And in respect for the peaceful protests, I want to say hands up, don't shoot. Black Lives Matter.
The risk of domestic disorder is also heightened by the fact that distrust in government and leadership in the United States and other Western countries continues to remain near historic lows. Corruption, social alienation, and lack of community, all of which were contributing factors to the 2011 London riots, are all creating a powder keg situation that could blow at any moment. The United States government's inability to fund social programs could also lead to the seizure of private pension funds.
The euro, the creation of the euro, was all about not creating a strong Europe, but it was, because he's not European, he's Canadian American. It was about making sure that each nation would no longer have control of its own fiscal fate, that they would be stuck competing against each other by reducing services and provided by the government. So that is, you keep cheapening your workforce. And he was very blunt about it. He said that's the purpose of it. It's not to make Europe stronger. It's to make the nations within Europe impotent. And that was his philosophy. So.
And that's the same thing with NAFTA and GATT. Ross Perot was right. The race to the bottom, and we got the SPP, North American Union documents 3 years ago when Judicial Watch sued and got them. And they said, they had all these corporate chiefs there at the governmental meeting telling the Secretary of State of Mexico, Canada, and the United States what to do. And they said we're going to lower the U.S. and Canada to the level of Mexico, just as we've done with the euro, so there's nowhere to run, nowhere to compete, and now we're going to play nations off against each other all over the world, Asia, European Union, North American Union, to basically get all the tax money for bankers as bailouts and take people's pension funds. And now we see Bloomberg reporting that federal regulators are preparing to take at least half of people's pensions in the U.S.
As real wages drop, it will also become increasingly harder to pacify younger generations via consumer culture. Lifestyles built around the acquisition of products will become harder to maintain as the economic environment worsens. These factors, when combined with further police brutality and a growing sense of injustice, almost guarantee to cause more civil unrest over the next 2 years, fulfilling economist Martin Armstrong's prediction that a serious political uprising will erupt by 2016 in the United States. John Bound for Infowars.com.
And that's from last night's nightly news. That's why it's so important to watch the nightly news. It's always 30 minutes long. We're going to an hour later this month, full time. But some nights it's 5 hours long. In fact, last Friday night, covering the Draw Muhammad contest in Phoenix, we were live for 4.5 hours. On election night, 8 hours. So that's why it's important to be a member of prisonplanet.tv. All right, we just skipped this network break. I want to say, again, hi to all the stations and affiliates out there and the listeners. Let me now go ahead and launch into this piece of news that I already mentioned, but I want to detail. This is from CBS News. We have it linked on Infowars.com. Just like we kept hammering the studies that were out there that fluoride, 7-fold increase in bone cancer, brain damage, IQ reductions, fractures in bones, just you name it, Harvard studies and others, we kept hammering. Because of lawsuits and other things, the feds have now said lower it by half and ban it in pesticide. And we're just going to continue hammering the SSRIs and other anti-anxiety medications because as a family, they make people psychotic killers. Not everybody, but a goodly percentage. Every mass shooter I've ever seen has been on one of these. And as soon as I heard some guy was wandering around like a zombie last year, a couple years ago, and shot a cop for no reason in Walmart, I said, that guy's going to be probably on Xanax or something. It was Xanax. Because you can take the stuff like that and go to bed and just wake up and basically sleepwalk. But they'll never prosecute the companies. They'll always throw the zombie in prison, as if that does anything. Painkillers, anti-anxiety medications linked to increased risk of homicide. CBS Atlanta, for the first time ever, that is not true. Scientists have linked prescription drugs that affect the central nervous system to an increased risk of committing homicide. Is that why we forced about 12 years ago all Prozac derivative drugs to say it can cause psychotic breaks and make you kill people and commit suicide? It was known when they tried to approve it in the 70s and they couldn't. European researchers found that people who were taking a class of tranquilizers called, and I can't pronounce this, benzodiazepines. Am I pronouncing that right?
Benzodiazepines.
Benzodiazepines were more likely to kill someone than those who were not taking these medicines, reports Live Science. Yeah, that's why Joe Biggs has told the story. I did some research and talked to other combat units, and it happened to them as well. But when they were on daily patrols, getting blown up by IEDs every few weeks, getting shot at every day, killing people almost every day, they ordered them to take classic opiates. And that's also to addict them and then claim they're drug addicts later. But I have Joe come in here and tell you the story, but they knew it because it made them basically machines while compromising them. Elvis was ordered to go on speed when he was in the Army. That has been declassified. They would make him play so many shows. They said, listen, you will take this, you will do it. It's all part of the control. European researchers found that people who are taking the class of tranquilizers, those drugs are used to treat anxiety, insomnia, and panic disorders. Pain relievers such as opioid medication, and anti-inflammatories were also found to increase a person's risk of homicide. I think that these chemical substances affect the impulse control of a person, said Dr. Jari Tillowen, lead author and the professor, told Medical Daily. The only surprising